If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it would be greatly appreciated if you could give the podcast a 5-star rating. This helps other listeners just like you discover the show. Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Andrew Pledger, and this is Beyond BJU Exposing Fundamentalism. And today I am really excited to dig into today's topic, which is the mask of authoritarian power. And I feel like this is such an important topic, and it's really relevant to everything going on in the country right now, and information that can help us spot authoritarianism or authoritarian tendencies in any group, relationship, or setting. And I am reading a lot of information today from a book called The Guru Papers, Mask of Authoritarian Power. And this is just a masterpiece of a work on authoritarian power in different contexts, and digging also a lot into just social psychology and sociology. And it's a book I'll probably read over and over again the rest of my life, just the information that's packed in it. And this was written in the 90s or published, and it's so relevant still. And it is by Joel Kramer and Diana Alstad. And I actually looked at the book today. I didn't realize I bought this online. I didn't know it was a signed copy. Diana signed in it. She, I guess, yes, looked like she was giving this to a friend. I'm not going to say the person's name they were giving it to, but that was interesting to me. But off topic, but yeah, so we are digging into the mask of authoritarian power today. And this is a Patreon bonus episode, so I want to thank my Patreon supporters who allow me to do this work. If you are listening to this preview and are not a Patreon supporter, I would appreciate you joining my Patreon community. The link is in the description of the episode, but my Patreon supporters allow me to do this work, and I'm so grateful for them. I release 2 bonus episodes a month. There are other benefits on my Patreon, like early releases of my podcast, Uncovered BJU files. And I'm also starting to release a video series, which I'll be announcing soon. But if you want to look at my Patreon and see what's going on there, link is in the description. And it starts at $3 a month. And there is a 7-day free trial, actually, if you want to just explore. And there actually is a free option to become a free member, which basically is following me on Patreon, and you can access the little bit of free content I release. But you can click on the link and see the different options. But let's get into this bonus episode of Beyond BJU called The Mask of Authoritarian Power. I think it is always important to really define terms. So what is authoritarianism? So I'm reading from the Guru Papers on page 9, and it says, and I quote, "Authoritarianism is interwoven in, but not identical to, authority, hierarchy, and power." This chapter sets the stage for the rest of the book by mapping out how we distinguish these overlapping, intertwined concepts that are too often lumped together. Webster's dictionary defines authoritarian as characterized by unquestioning obedience to authority. When the word is used in reference to a political system, it involves using force to control people without there being any recourse. We broaden the meaning to include belief systems that are unchallengeable and the idea that someone or something other than the individual necessarily knows what's best or right or proper for a given person. So ideologies and belief systems can be intrinsically authoritarian if there is no way to take issue with their basic assumptions. And the book also says, and I quote, "Both the willingness to follow another unquestioningly and wanting to be strictly obeyed may be linked to a genetic program of dominance and submission common in other social animals. But whether or not there is such a genetic propensity in humans, when dominance and submission are structured into social norms and taught to children, it becomes impossible to separate out what is natural from what is contrived. Traditional sex roles are another example of rigid social structures, greatly exaggerating, distorting, and then institutionalizing gender differences through conditioning, social pressure, and even coercion. This travesty of whatever differences there may be is then called natural. Not all people blindly obey. Moreover, if people are forced to obey, they will tend to force others to obey, given the opportunity. If children are taught to mistrust themselves, and in parentheses it says a prerequisite for the authoritarian personality, once these children grow up, they will have little option other than looking for someone else to trust, especially under stress. What this shows is that whatever the genetic base, much of authoritarianism is taught. Until children are raised to trust themselves and social forms reward, not punish this, there is no basis for making nature the cause of authoritarianism in arenas of power. Mental or psychological authoritarianism comes from an inner urge to obey someone or something that is viewed as higher, more powerful, morally superior, or more knowledgeable, or to be that for someone else. These two stances are not mutually exclusive, but they usually coexist in the same person and are triggered by different circumstances. Even if this propensity, like aggression, is part of being human, this does not mean that authoritarianism and the forms of coercion and aggression that support it need to be catered to or accepted. Humanity hopes lies in its capacity not to accept the way its past has been played out. Much of psychological authoritarianism is masked by ideologies that make it a virtue. Thank you for listening to this Patreon bonus preview of this episode of Beyond BJU. You can access the full episode on my Patreon. The link is in the description. Thank you.